Good evening, everybody. It's so great to see you all. We are full house from the look of it. It's a really lovely amount of people. And as Chris said, I want to make this very interactive. Emma is going to do a lot of embodiment work, some really magical work, and I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. I want to balance up the journey that I've taken over the last 17 years. I had a very interesting experience happen about 17 years ago with this remarkable Japanese man called Kishi-san. And it opened my heart up and it allowed all of this very esoteric work to come through. And I was working at the time as a healing practitioner and started to offer this very, if you like, raw esoteric work with people that would support them to come into their spontaneity and playfulness. But it really was quite full on. It was very raw. And so around about 9-10 years ago, as I started to work with these same people, I wanted to bring something in that could give a little bit of structure and grounding. And over the years, it's evolved. And I would say around about 6 years ago, it kind of solidified as something that I've found has really helped me a lot in my life to do what's on the can of this beautiful evening, which is to support deeper creativity, freedom, and joy. So when Chris first asked Emma and I to do this night, it was about, I think the old title is still on some of the emails and that, about dealing with challenging emotions. And the formula definitely supports that because it really looks at what happens when we're not in our creativity, where that energy goes instead. It isn't too heady, this, but it does provide, if you like, a framework. So I'm going to do a little bit of esoteric work just before I hand over to Emma using some art alchemy. But prior to that, I really want to go into what the formula is because it's actually, I think, very easy. So if you have a pen and paper to hand, that would be wonderful. I'll give you a minute just to grab one if you don't. If you don't have one, if it's not easy for you, don't worry at all. I just find it might be useful so I don't have to keep the share screen up for too long. Good. So as I said, this work I find really sits alongside in my own personal practice and for clients of mine, alongside the deep movement, the spontaneous, the playful, the embodied. So to have a little bit of kind of framework to contemplate. This isn't some complex theory, it's just a space to contemplate. So I'm going to share the screen. There we go. Okay. So X equals A minus B. Now I know for some of you, as soon as you hear anything that looks remotely mathematical, it might be like, oh, gourd, which is why I made it lots of pretty colors. I would love you to write that down on a piece of paper. And then what I'm going to do is take it off the screen. So it isn't too complicated. It's X equals A minus B. And if for those of you that don't have a piece of paper, just that's what we're working with today. So you can hopefully remember that. Okay, I'm going to take that off the screen. Let's go back to here. Great. Okay, so what I want you to do is just unmute yourself. If you've got any questions, if you're like, hang on, I didn't get that, or what do you mean by that? Or what about in this case? Let's just keep this really fluid and flowing. We've got about 35 minutes now. Let's see what time it is. Yeah. So I want to introduce these three variables. The reason I want to introduce them is I found that one of the key obstacles to living more from heart, which is a synonym for me for expressing our creativity, is not really understanding what happens when we don't, how we can create these vicious circles. So X, for the sake of argument, and write whatever notes you want to against this, so it just keeps it easier to keep it in balance, is the degree to which we trust that we can live from our hearts. X is the name of the game as far as everything I've been doing for the last 17 years. All of the work that I'm interested in supporting people to do to deepen their creativity requires us to raise this magic variable, the degree to which we trust that our heart is a place that we could actually live from. Not just a place for special occasions or something sentimental or romantic, but an actual viable alternative to the ego. So when I talk about heart, I'm not simply talking about the heart chakra. I'm talking about a place where our body, mind, our soul, and our spirit come together and integrate. I could bang on about this for hours alone, so I want to move quite quickly. So if anyone just wants me to reiterate, just unmute and just ask me. So the heart is a place where these three aspects come together and integrate. As a human being, I believe it's the only place in us where we're able to touch the infinite dimension of spirit, or the causal, whatever preferred word you use, and also that playful, spontaneous place that some call the subtle, which I'm going to call soul, just for sake of argument. That spontaneous place where we can experience that delicious lightness of our own nature. And of course, it's grounded in the body-mind with all of its intelligences, the somatic gut intelligence, the intelligence of the electrical organ of the heart, and of course, the intelligence of the brain. So the heart for me isn't a heart versus head conversation. It is a place where we integrate all of our intelligences, including the rational and the linear, alongside the spontaneous, the multidimensional. So when I'm speaking of soul, I'm speaking of us in all these dimensions, all these lifetimes. That intelligence comes through. So for me, creativity is spontaneous, grounded, heart-centered action. Creativity through ways that we can show up from our heart, or more often from our ego. So the art is step by step finding a way to live more from heart, and that's what I hope the formula, which I'll come to very shortly, can support us to do tangibly. So X is the degree to which we trust that our hearts are a place that we could actually live from and therefore be creative from. Now, on that spectrum of creativity, we have the everyday. We also have, situated perhaps in the middle, the arts. So that's a full spectrum of arts. It could be the martial arts, the culinary arts, the fine arts, the performing arts, all of those areas where we've got a particular focus around craft, expressing with very powerful impact. I believe that art that is heart-centered is alchemical. It supports us in transformation, which is one of the ways that I firmly believe, alongside many others, that we can actually increase X by engaging with heart-centered art. But I'm going to come to that in a little bit, all the different ways we can increase X. Along that spectrum of creativity, at the other end, we will find alchemy, which many people have called the royal art, the great art the ancient Egyptians refer to it as. So that's the art of our own personal transformation. So we bring creativity when we come into this divine experience of what it means to be human, with all the karmic inheritance we have from 7+ generations of ancestors, all of our own trauma, of all of our own conditioning. This is the material that we will transform over the course of our lives as we bring our creativity to that. So X is the degree to which we trust we can live from our hearts. For most of us, coming out of most of the conditioning that many of us would have experienced growing up in the West, for that matter, everywhere in the world, it doesn't is often considered heretical. The idea that we could really come into our own hearts and live from that place is something that we can't take for granted. It's something that we have to cultivate. So X for most of us will start off low. A, that's not the case. So X equals A minus B, the second part of the three different parts of it. A, if you want to write this down, is our raw, vital, evolutionary life force. over the course of 17 years of working with clients, and certainly 9 years of using this, I can see that so many of us come in with different amounts of A from the moment we're born. I have no idea why that is. Perhaps we're old souls or primed for really engaging in this world in a meaty way. And so the universe, God, goddesses said, right, let's give this beast a whole lot of A just from the offset. So this is raw evolutionary energy. Now it sounds great, doesn't it? Raw evolutionary energy. Yeah, sign me up for lots of that. It is raw for a reason, because it doesn't take prisoners. Human beings that are invariably sticky and often find themselves scared to show up in their fullness. And when I say fullness, I mean meaty fullness. When they have this kind of life energy coming through them, it can be really, really bumpy. This is raw life force energy. Evolution itself is propelled forward by this energy. And we are on the cutting edge of evolution as human beings. All of existence is, but we really have a remarkable opportunity to be an expression of evolution, or unfortunately, more often the opposite. And that's where -B comes in. -B, for use of a better word, could be summarized as drama, neurosis, addiction, anything that we use to siphon off that energy that we do not feel it is safe to express creatively. So I want to give you an example. The great Whitney Houston, good friends with a woman that was her backing singer for a long time, and so I knew Whitney personally. Whitney had a girlfriend called Lisa, a soulmate. She was a gay woman, Whitney Houston. It came out in a recent biography about her, a really brilliant documentary about her. And she was very happy with Lisa, and for various pressures of the business, Kevin Costner, the bodyguard, blah, 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 she was pressured into a marriage, which wasn't that uncommon. So she gets together with Bobby Brown. So in her world, on stage, that magnificent A. So Whitney, we'll just give her an arbitrary number of 1,000 for her A. It's big. There is a remarkable life force coming through that woman at the raw level. And when she was on stage, it was safe in her mind. She could trust that she could bring it to the dance floor every time, tens across the board. She could show up. There was no issue there. But outside of that, to live from her heart across the board was not something that she was able to do easily. She could not be herself in a number of ways. I'm not just talking about her sexuality, but as a woman of color, conditioned and grown up in America, we don't need to go beyond many more things than that to know that the world is not applauding when you show up in your full authenticity off the bat. So let's just give Whitney a really arbitrary number of 10. So X is 10. So 10 equals 1,000. To make the maths work there, you need a really big -B. So that's minus 990. Does that make sense, everyone? 10 equals 1,000 minus 990. So a low permission to show up, to trust that from our hearts, that integrated place of body, mind, soul, and spirit, it is safe for us to listen to that voice. A voice which only exists in the present moment, doesn't take position. It's a quiet whisper, one step at a time. So when that is not safe, you have to offset it with -B. And in her case, it was a crack addiction that eventually brought about the end of her life. So many artists, so many sensitives die through addiction, through drama, through self-harm. It's a tale we tell so many times for artists. When you think of a word that goes before the word artist, very rarely do we say self-sustaining, functional. We hear starving. We think of artistic license. People get away with all kinds of dysfunctional behavior as if somehow creativity and dysfunction or addiction are somehow synonymous. In my experience, it's exactly the opposite of that. With the clients I've worked with over the years, many of them that have wrestled with addiction or self-harming or neurosis, extreme neurosis, in the face of exquisite sensitivity and in the face of exquisite passion, They have found that they can't balance this up, that somehow they've got to choose between a very low caliber life, as if they could just turn the volume down on everything, and then somehow they'd be okay. Well, evolution has no interest in turning the volume down on our life. A is something that never decreases. So someone that is facing addiction cannot turn the volume down on that. For all of you, whether you are experiencing addiction or neurosis or compulsion or attachment of any kind, something you know is not an authentic expression of your life, you'll often know it's a really awful choice that you have to make between choosing the binge or the purge. The kind of mania that comes with expressing that life force, or somehow having to quieten everything down to an impossible level. And for those of you that have tried to stop a -B that was destructive without having taken care of the X, going to the real root of it, often people will just find another thing to replace it. They call that cross addiction. One of the common cross addiction patterns is for people that are overeaters, that use food as a -B. They can get stomach bypass surgery, so they literally cannot eat to numb anymore. And it's a very common cross addiction that they will go from overeating to alcoholism and sex addiction. It shifts over, and they're warned about it, and they say, you know what, at least I'm thin. So they move without looking at X. If you think about it, you got to do the maths. I, for one, believe if we did not have -B, we would literally explode. Energy coming through you, you cannot spend it from heart because you don't believe it's safe to, then you've got to offset it. That is raw life force. So, any questions about what X, A, or B are? Okay, so for me, the name of the game is raising X. Of course, when we experience our lives as struggling, whether it be through the extremes of addiction or just feeling so discombobulated, unnurtured, unsupported, of course, we can look to the -B and recognize this is something that's calling me perhaps into a moment of vulnerability and evolution, in fact. Every time we recognize I'm fed up of hitting my head against that wall, it didn't work, this didn't make me feel more joyful, more alive, more authentic, then I see this as being grace, a moment to say, maybe that place that I have avoided for so long, the heart, my heart, maybe it is a place I could go to. So rather than beating ourselves up when we find ourselves in -B, maybe just in this moment, it could be a call to say, maybe there is another way, right here, right now. Not creating a big label out of it, a big identity of never again, this is the last time, all of that drama, that's another -B, a very good way of siphoning off our vital life force. As Chris said at the very beginning, shaming ourselves over eating a packet of biscuits is another form of -B. It's something to do with all that energy, getting into the tailspins of worthiness, unworthiness, righteousness, all of this. In this lifetime, I haven't used drugs and alcohol as a numbing agent. I use self-righteousness instead. I used the mental degree of trying to shape my world into something that I could try to control. That was my -B, and boy, was that effective. Boy, did that drain the life out of me in a way that meant I didn't spontaneously combust, but it impacted the degree to which I felt part of this world. So one of the unfortunate aspects, as we can see in the life of so many great creative geniuses, whether it's Charlie Parker, Jackson Pollock, Amy Winehouse, Whitney Houston, that die from this, is that as -B gets more and more destructive, the effect on X, our ability to trust that in and of ourselves that we are enough, decreases. Whilst A never goes down, it only goes up, X can really go through the floor. It is something that every moment we can show up to support the increase of. So, two ways that we look at X increasing. One is healing, and one is cultivating. At the level of healing, we want freedom from those things that tell us in and of ourselves we're not enough. That tell us we don't deserve to live in a way that is deeply passionate, deeply pleasurable. So for all of us, we have our demons from conditioning, perhaps ancestral karma, what we can loosely call the shadow. Now, there are so many bodies of work out there. The formula I find is useful because it helps put into context other magnificent bodies of work, such as Emma's that we'll be doing all together afterwards, that can directly support us in X. So this is not saying, okay, this is the way to raise X and it's the only way. All of my work is about supporting that, but there are a myriad of brilliant ways out there. Two ways that I love more than any other outside of my own work are Byron Katie's work. She is brilliant at bringing you into contact with the stories we have that stop us living more from heart, and the gene keys, as in Gene, like DNA genes. Gene keys for me is off the scale, boots the house down, one of the best bodies of work I've seen that deals with working with the shadow and bringing alchemy to it. So however you find material that supports you to go to the freedom from place, it's fundamental if we want to live a life of creativity. Addiction, drama, neurosis is directly related in a very simple way to the degree to which we allow ourselves to be creative. They're not somehow either or, and they most definitely aren't linked as a prerequisite, requiring drama and addiction. Exactly. As I said, the degree to which we trust that we can live from heart for many of us will be different according to the context of our life. Nina Simone, one of my favorite singers, is a brilliant example of this. Her daughter made a Netflix documentary that was an excellent portrayal of her as a tortured artist. On stage, she was free as a bird. So many people said that when she came off stage, she was caged. X fell through the floor, and resentment was her primary drug. I know she used drugs as well, but resentment was one of the things that ate her up. And so as we recognize in our own lives, we may feel that we can share perhaps our gifts, our enthusiasm, our courage with a small circle, but if we want to step out onto the public stage, oh, hell no, and boom, it goes down. So it's not one imaginary number that somehow fits every context. We may find in certain contexts, we feel it's safe to come to that place, or we may not. We may find there's no context it's safe to go to that, and the ego is the only thing we trust. But we also can find that where we meet that idea, off stage or wherever it might be, that's where we can find the freedom from. So we're called every moment that we move into something that is a destructive or inauthentic expression of our life force, there is a beautiful invitation. So if you take away nothing else from this evening than that in that moment where we recognize that we are harming ourselves or others, there is an invitation, a whisper from God, Goddess herself, saying, there is a moment here of courage that you could bring to your relationship with your own life. And it's one step at a time. The heart is only interested in us taking one step into that which is more truthful, more beautiful, and kinder. One step at a time, that's all it wants. The heart has no interest in us being enlightened overnight. It's interested in one step at a time. So the final thing I want to point to is freedom to. Freedom from is all very good, the healing side. Let's imagine somehow we miraculously shifted all of our karma, all of our conditioning, and there was nothing that got in our way. We wouldn't necessarily be able to still bring it with all that life force if we have flaccid muscles, energetically and physically. We have to cultivate our curiosity, our spontaneity, our bodies. So cultivation is as important as healing. To be human is not an easy thing, and to live creatively is certainly no entitlement. As we step into these very, very rich lives, which we're never going to heal all of our dramas and our conditionings anyway, but we can heal more and more and more of them. So it's not like something we're ever going to tick. But as we do that, we come more close to that element of us that wants to play. And it isn't an either or. It isn't like I'll do a bit of healing and then I can cultivate. We can do these at the same time. Perhaps there'll be times in our lives where we'll go through years where we're really focused on the cultivation more than the healing. Or perhaps it's more healing than cultivation. But for me, to raise X, we've got to bring it up. Now, let me see the time. I've got a little bit more time here. To raise up X at the level of simple cultivation for me is a practice of connecting to the body. I want us to contemplate now 4 areas of life: food and drink, sex, movement, and rest. All of them are fundamental to ordinary living. So let's say, as we were talking about creativity earlier on, I was, as I was in my monologue talking about creativity earlier on, the ordinary realm is one of the most fertile for really coming into this juiciness. It's a very personal thing. Perhaps, well, I imagine for some of them, if we're sharing meals with people and if we're having sex with other people, then they will also be aware of how much we are bringing it. But it is a very personal practice. It certainly isn't as public as if we're sharing our artwork with the world. And it's not as high intensity as deep alchemy. But where we can bring our focus to deep food / drink, deep sex, deep movement, and deep rest, I feel that's one of the areas when I'm working with clients that I want them to really get juicy in the exploration around free. I said earlier, there are 3 aspects to the heart as far as I'm concerned in this body of work. The bit that's all about structure, the bit that's about spontaneity, and the bit that's about stillness. So I want you to consider, let's say food, for example. The first aspect of how you're going to show up with your food, cooking it, or hopefully eating it, if you're not cooking it yourself, as someone that has done this, is looking at the simple structure of it, the provenance of the ingredients, nutrition, recipes, the idea that this is something that you could learn in a very direct way. That's the structure of life. That's the first aspect of the heart, the first aspect of creativity. So you've got your rules there. What size you chop the onions, where you get your vegetables from or your meat from, the provenance of that, the quality of them, how in that recipe or that culture they bring those ingredients together compared to a different way. This is all about specificity. So really embracing that. Of course, it goes across all of life, but we're just looking at food here. The second aspect hacks the first one. So maybe you cook that recipe twice and you're like, I want to play with this. I want to switch this, and this over. I want to see what happens if I add more of that. I want to really mash it up. Bringing in the playfulness, the curiosity, the spontaneity. That sits shoulder to shoulder with the structure. They aren't mortal enemies. They coexist in the heart. And so often we've been told it's one or the other. And so many of us creative types and spiritual types often eschew structure because we somehow feel it's a betrayal of that wonderful passion. It isn't. It's as much the heart as structure, as spontaneity is. So when we're cooking, to bring in that ability to hack the rules, to move beyond all the craft, to also bring in the spontaneity. Now, the third aspect of food, the Koreans have a name for 2 different types of deliciousness. They call the first one mouth deliciousness, and the second one hand deliciousness. So mouth deliciousness we're all familiar with. It tastes good in the mouth. But the hand deliciousness is when people can tell that the person who cooked their food brought love to it. It wasn't from any fancy preparation technique, nor imaginative, curious, playful spontaneity. It was from the third aspect of heart, the realm of stillness, emptiness, fullness, however you want to refer to that infinite nature. So when we can find a practice where we can be aware that we're bringing all 3, perhaps not equally, we all have a preference for where I'm very second aspect bias in my life. But the more that we can start to bring in structure alongside stillness, we're not at war with ourselves. And I find if we can find areas, whether it be sex, whether it be movement, whether it be food and drink or rest, and bring a 3 aspect approach to that, then we are cultivating our capacity to show up when life goes, oh, you know what? This beach here just did a whole lot of healing. X is going up. And rather than just saying, okay, we can take the pressure off minus B now, X has gone up. Let's say Whitney, if she got the support, it went up to 500 on X. She's still bringing that 1,000. It's not like the universe is going to go, oh, it's fine. The universe wants evolution. So what invariably happens is A goes up. So we get in the realm of genius when this happens. But genius is not an easy thing, as many of you know. I know many of you here, and I know many of you have touched genius in a myriad of ways. It isn't easy because it requires us to keep raising X, which requires us to go to the painful places, which requires us to show up with cultivation. But that's what the incentive is, that we get to ground that genius. And with that genius comes new ways of showing up to support each other and our planet at a time when we need this more than ever. So it's a calling on the part of evolution for us to show up. This is something that brings us together. So the final thing I want to do, actually, before I do that, are there any questions or comments or anyone that's got any sense of saying, you know what, I can see a minus B of mine that may not have been something that seemed obvious. Anyone got anything they'd like to share?
Just a few quick things. Firstly, it's amazing. I can't even, it's just so brilliant. As a creative, you mentioned a lot about creativity and art, as you said, and all of that. You did mention at the beginning about it includes things like martial arts and all kinds of arts. Is this the formula surely as well, literally is to everything? Like if your A, for example, wasn't so much about artistic creativity or alchemy, but being a mother or being a scientist or being a human on the planet that has a goal or a purpose, that, you know, there might be, I don't know, I just wonder if you could just help sort of talk about that side of things in relation to the formula that you've been speaking about, because I think it helped people who maybe hear the word creativity and be like, that's not for me, you know, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Creativity, as I said, is on a full spectrum.
Yeah.
A small part of that spectrum is the arts. So, excuse me, from the most ordinary element of it, showing up in day-to-day living, you've got something in between that and the arts, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, a stay-at-home father, a stay-at-home mother, you are working from an operating system of ego or heart. Most likely moving between the two. Whatever it is, you're showing up as a living being with the idea of how do I make that next step? Where do I listen for that voice of wisdom? Am I in fear? Am I in love? Fundamentally. So whatever our practices are, whatever our work is, this speaks to that. How do we show up? And so for me, the word creativity needs to be untethered from this tiny elite. Creativity is the birthright of everyone because we all have heart. We all have heart equally. There's not one of us that has more heart than another. Body, mind, soul, spirit, it's immeasurable because spirit is infinite and we're all human here. So therefore we all have equal capacity to live a life that is creative. That's not some like nice little sound good cliche. From the definition of what heart is, it's a simple fact. We all have that capacity. Now, the degree to which we live creatively is X. So that's where we can all show up. So as you say, Chris, this isn't a matter of saying, oh, these people over here, they struggle, the Whitneys, the Jackson Pollocks, the Charlie Parkers, they're the obvious ones. But there are so many of us that are struggling day in, day out because it's not easy being human and being authentic. Very little of our society reflects that back to us, that would be a good idea. Quite the exact opposite. Even if they're not patting people on the back for having crystal meth addictions, they are patting them on the back for finding that they have an identification with, I don't know, a Dolce & Gabbana pair of sunglasses or perfume or a particular status that comes from having belonged to this group of worthies versus this group of unworthies. Whether it be for political identification or whatever way, we can find ways to imagine ourselves as only worthy because. So there's so much of that undermining. So absolutely, Chris, as you said, we show up as human beings first and foremost, as creative beings, whether it be in the stuff that nobody sees or it be in the front face, the fact that we drive a bus, how we connect with the people that get on our buses. Does that answer it, Chris?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Gary, I think would like to ask or say something. Gary?
Oh no, I was just doing the clap emoji like, yes, girl.
Oh, unfortunately, the clap emoji on here is the hand raise.
Oh, is it?
Chris.
Oh no, mine was just like, you better,
You better work.
Can you hear me?
Oh, who's that?
It's Chris Milnes. Hello.
Oh, yes, darling. I'm just finding you on the thing. Yes.
Oh, I've not got my camera on.
Go on.
I just wanted to ask, could Neil repeat something for me? You said when it's time to show up, the God Goddess whispers, here is a moment, something, 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 and it ended with that you can apply to your life or something along that. Could you repeat that for me?
I don't know if I can repeat that sentence. 1 second. I am a fembot, so let me just get the... When that moment occurs where we realize we've been hitting our head against the wall, I see that as an invitation, a whisper, rather than a shaming whisper, the exact opposite. We aren't the problem here. We inherit all of this karmic baggage. We inherit our ancestral baggage. As children, we take things very personally. We enter into the world around about the age of 7 or 8 with the first aspects of our ego and trauma established. So of course, it feels unsafe to live from heart. So as we enter as adults, taking full responsibility, of course, for what's going on in our lives, otherwise it's hopeless. Minus B, when that moment of impact occurs and we realize, rather than that being another cycle of shame, that is another minus B energy, there is a whisper from the universe that says, you have an opportunity for vulnerable, courageous enthusiasm. A part of you that you have not allowed to shine is perhaps within one step reach. And all it requires, when I say all it requires, it's probably the biggest thing we could ever ask of ourselves, is to take that courageous single step. To consider, in fact, that we are not in and of ourselves the problem, quite the exact opposite. In and of ourselves, we are more than enough. And to drown out that noise is a huge, huge act of courage, even if just for one moment. I know that does not answer your question in terms of what were the 3 words that were missing in that sentence. But
No, it's great. Thank you.
if the others, but I hope that speaks to it.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Just so I check my understanding. So you said that it's not heart versus mind.
Yeah.
And is it heart versus ego?
Pretty much, but the heart has such compassion for the ego.
Okay, so where does you don't think or believe that the ego exists in the condition in the mind or some parts of it? Because that's where we get our triggers predominantly, isn't it? In the conscious, when we're being triggered.
Yeah, I think it's all, the use of the word mind as a functional element of something that could be harnessed in a way that is fear-based or love-based. That's the definition when I say it's not heart versus mind. I see the mind as an incredible tool that is neutral. So ego would be I love Adyashanti's definition of ego, which is identification with trauma. Other people say ego is how we get out of childhood alive. So it's an operating system that the mind will work with, but heart is just as much a viable operating system. And so that sense of rational, linear intelligence, there's nothing egoic about that. It's just a way of working. It's a way of showing up in these bodies on this planet. It's a gift. Now, of course, the ego can create a massive stranglehold by insisting that everything has to be rational and linear, or if we're the opposite of that, then it can't be rational. So all of the people that are very prone to conspiracies have created an egoic relationship with the opposite of rationality. So it's not that the ego only thrives in an empirical, but it certainly can have a field day if it wants to reduce the world down to only those things that we can sense or measure. So there is a very oppressive nature.
Okay.
Chris, can I ask a question, darling? Are we okay to go to 9:30? Because I know Emma.
Yeah, no. I mean, we are going for 9:30. We'll just what we'll do is we've got one more question from Bakani for you, and then it's very chilled. I think everybody's engaged. We're all in. No one's got anywhere to go. This is brilliant.
You don't want to cut into any time of Emma's?
No. Emma's got a beautiful half an hour, if not longer. We are all here, and then we'll get Bakani to ask her question, and then any other questions we'll save to the end, and then people can ask them after Emma's meditation. But this is brilliant. So, Bakani, how are you? What's your question?
So much. This is so marvelously the right time for this workshop. It arrived, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've missed it, and I had it. So super excited. This has been very rich. Thank you. One observation was that that minus B thing, how it's shown up for me has been a little bit in terms of like hiding from this A. So for me, that looks like numbing, procrastinating. Like I literally had this book idea. I hid it under like a whole bunch of other books. I didn't look at it until recently, or like Netflix. So I just don't think about this thing that is calling me. So I really resonated a lot with me. My question is more around, this makes so much sense on an individual, like on when I think about my practice and myself, it's how I bring that to connecting with others. So I think as an artist, as creative, yes, I work very well on my own, kind of okay, with that slightly more reclusive part of myself. But I also love to work with others. And how do I bring some of these insights into that?
Beautiful question, Bakani. That she found it safe to operate on stage with her piano, but off stage, it was a different arena. So if we look at these different arenas, essentially, for where we're showing up. So for one, I've been a working artist for many years, and I very happily can bring my heart through, and I can create bodies of work, and then I can share them with friends and family. But to step beyond that for me has been a massive leap. So to collaborate is another arena where we may or may not find that we trust ourselves, that X is high or low there. So more likely as we move into different arenas and we acknowledge that, so in this case, interpersonal connection, the freedom from dimension, certain elements will come up that are ready to be seen, moment by moment. Like when Christopher asked in that moment there, that sense of grace, that calling, as we find ourselves either avoiding or it not being harmonious when we do step in there, that there is an invitation for healing, but also the freedom to, the cultivation of how to work with others. So whatever that arena is, we aren't imbued with the human skills of showing up with this energy. That's down to us. We want to innovate new ways of how we collaborate. This is the nature of art. It's not like, okay, I'm going to get the book out, Collaborating for Dummies. It's like, okay, I haven't read it, so therefore I'm going to read it, X is going to go much higher. It's like, we get to creatively discover how we show up with others authentically. And of course, engaging in that as a practice is a surefire way of cultivating it. And finding out, just slowing it down just a tiny bit, what was my trigger there? And that takes us into that. So of course, if we start to apply this in the context of, say, sex or relationship, possibly the most fertile area where you're going to see the work that's required for freedom from, when it comes to really showing up authentically, literally naked, emotionally, physically, how we show up there. I've spoken to a number of gay men recently. I'm 49 and a gay man, and it astounds me. I mean, we didn't grow up with gay marriage. We didn't grow up with many of the brilliant civil rights that we have now in the UK. And yet I speak to some of these guys, and so many of them tell me these are really well-balanced people that live very functional lives, that many of their friends in their 20s as gay men cannot have sex sober or clean. They literally cannot show up with another in a sexual context if they're not high or if they're not drunk. And that astounds me. I know certainly for my generation, there's been lots of drug taking and drinking within the context of being a gay man. But so many of my peers of my age, they don't require, or they didn't require that in order to do that. So it really concerns me, that arena of in and of myself, am I enough to even show up? So of course, that's the entry point. That's the knock on the door that says, there is an opportunity for you here to consider what it might be like to be more raw. And we've got to be so compassionate with ourselves. Wherever we are is where we are. That one doesn't need writing down, as I had that come out of my mouth. Wherever we are is where we are, yeah. We'll end it on that. No, we won't. Wherever we are is literally what's going on in our lives. It's where we're at, it's what's real. To come out of that into some fantasy of where we should be, that is one of the worst -Bs on the planet. Show up with this moment right here, right now, wherever it is, and with a call of the heart to say, I want to collaborate with people, or I want to be able to be intimate in and of myself and not be checked out. That's the call of the heart. It's the invitation. That's grace. That's God, Goddess wanting to know what sex is like through us, clear-minded. It's an invitation. It's a whisper. That's all. We can't really screw it up. We can live lives of immense suffering and cause harm and suffering to the planet and each other, but we can't really screw it up. What we are these magnificent expressions of evolution, experimental expressions of evolution.
Thank you so much. Amazing, beautiful, amazing work. And as I said, you know, this is a real introduction to Neo's work. Neo's a firm favourite on our retreats and other events that we have. And, you know, he's just an email away if you want to explore anything more about this with him. Because I feel like we've scratched a lot of surfaces and got a lot of people excited, because ultimately he's teaching us stuff that we really do know. We're remembering, it's just put in a really simple and beautiful formula for us to grasp and work with. And work with it we will, as we pass over to Emma, who's going to be, yes, firing up the X, firing up our hearts. How are you, Emma? So yeah, everybody send Neo lots of love, and then let's bring in the beautiful, majestic goddess. Emma, how are you, my love?
I'm good. Very, very happy to be here with you beautiful people. So nice to see everybody's faces, some old faces, some new faces. Yeah, I felt like I was getting so many activations from your just what was coming out. I was feeling like these little muscle twitches all over my body. So it definitely felt really ancestral. It was really speaking to different deep parts of me. I don't know if anyone else felt that. And also it kind of, there was so much that landed for me as well. I'm a creative, and I have times of hyper, almost like manic creation, where I'm really, like that at the moment, where even I'm working in my dreams and creating projects in my dreams, and I'm like, and this is the time when I need to be really, really careful that I don't sort of get blast off to space and then almost get a bit disembodied. So I'm very, very lucky that I do have the practices that I'm gonna go through tonight. So for anyone else who maybe feels that kind of disembodied feeling, or it's almost like when you've got so much joy and so much love as well, you don't know what to do with it, and it's like bursts out of you and it scatters everywhere. So today is all about bringing that back, and perhaps it's maybe not joy or creativity or energy that you have at the moment. Perhaps it's actually confusion, stress, this discombobulated, not really knowing where to turn. But again, these are all parts that are outside of ourselves. They're not embodied. So if you want to make any moves, like shuffle yourself into any nice position, then I encourage you to do that now, because we're going to go into a short meditation. If anyone needs to go to the loo, go now. have a little moment to just get back into the next sort of phase of this workshop. I got gifted a really beautiful homemade sage and rosemary bundle. I'm gonna try not to burn my house down. But just let the energy of this sacred smudge wash over you. I assure you it smells beautiful. Start to lengthen your breath. And really just start to drop into your feeling body. Sometimes it takes a while for us to get settled, for us to come back, and that's okay. So just like Neo was saying, it's all about accepting all of those different sides, all of those different facets of ourselves in this moment, in this space. That's the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves, and it's the kindest thing that we can do for others and the planet. I invite you to rub your hands together like this, create a little bit of friction, a bit of warmth, and place them over your eyes once they're nice and warm. And just rest the heel of your hand into your eye sockets. Rest your hands there for a moment and start to breathe really deeply. When you feel like you've gone into the darkness, keep your eyes closed and lower your hands down. Place one hand on your heart space now and one hand on your belly. Feel the warmth of your own touch. Place your hand on your body as if you're holding a baby. Bring that nurturing touch to yourself. And if you intuitively want to place your hand somewhere else, then move your hands wherever they're guided to go. I like to keep my work very, very intuitive and think of me as just a guide, somebody that's suggesting various things. And if they don't feel good and right for you, then don't go there. Perhaps you're naturally starting to move a little bit. Your body wants to sway with the music. Whatever's coming up, allow it to come. Move into a more comfortable place. And now start to imagine that you have a tiny little seed in the center of your heart. And And that seed can be any color that resonates with you. Whatever color it is, it's bright. Almost neon. But it's so tiny. You know it's there. As you rest now in this embodied state, start to think of all of the potentiality of this seed, your personal soul seed. What does it want to grow into? What parts of you want to be expressed through this seed? Maybe it's some hidden parts. Maybe it's a shadow side, one that got shut down when they were young. One that got told they weren't good enough. Maybe that wants to express itself in some way. Or maybe it's a secret passion that you have for dance or writing. I invite you now to start bringing these ideas in towards your body, in towards this soul seed in the center of your heart. You might visualize them as moving pictures or words. Draw everything into your center. Deepest inhale as you bring it all into your heart space. Exhale with an audible thank yourself. Thank your wonderful, marvelous self for being here in this moment and giving yourself the gift of creativity, the gift of freedom, the gift of joy, the gift of embodiment. Now all of these different facets and sides of you are embodied. Choose one that you would like to express. Take a moment. There's no rush. Okay, now I invite you to express this facet of yourself through moving your body. So you may want to find a space where you can stand up. You can absolutely lie down and enjoy the meditation, the moving meditation that you can do in your head. You can be the absolute most amazing dancer in your mind. I also invite you to start slow. Imagine this seed in the center of your heart is starting to just get a bit of sunlight. Bring the sunlight in. And perhaps some little shoots start to emerge. As your green shoots start to unfurl, this expression of whatever seed of creativity might be for you. Let your arms become and the shoots and the roots. Be very kind to yourself now. Often when we start to move like this, a lot of self-judgment comes up. How can we bring what we've just learned with Neo to this moment, to this spontaneous, heart-centered, grounded action? Feel free to turn your video off if you really want to go for it. And let me know if I need to turn the sound up on the music. How big is your seed now? What are you becoming? Perhaps you're still small and the goal is yet to be met. Or perhaps you're starting to stretch and really grow out of your shell. So if it feels comfortable for you now, I invite you to stand up with me. Stand up with me and start to rock from side to side. And bring your whole body into it. Move as slow as you can now. Keep your eyes closed if that feels comfortable. And start to rock now back and forward like this with your feet. So you're imagining your feet doing this. And as you do that, really place your attention onto your feet, onto your roots. And as you rock forwards and backwards, imagine you're growing roots down into the ground, down deep, deep into Pachamama. You get there, you get to the center of the crystalline core of the earth. Start to draw up universal healing energy from the center of the earth into your body to help increase and give life to the seed so you can birth it into the world. Really feel into the sole of your feet. We always forget about our feet. We walk with our feet, yet our brain is never in our feet. So today I invite you to embody your soul. Embody the soles of your feet in more ways than one, right? I wonder why the soul is also called the soul. Maybe that's because where we get our soul messages from. Start to increase and grow your movements now. Now you've got that grounded connection with the earth. invite some spirals into your body. That feels good. We came from this motion, from this spiral motion. This is evolution. The spiral is evolution. So when we spin, when we circle, it's very, very primal. And it helps to connect us back to source, connect us back to our roots. Make sure your knees are nice and bent here as well, and you're feeling into the ground. Keep your breathing soft. In fact, when you breathe, imagine you're breathing all the way down to your feet. Notice where your seed has grown. Perhaps it's turned into something different from when you started. Keep moving and keep metamorphosizing. Now I'd like to invite the energy. So imagine the rains are coming down. The rains are coming down to boost your energy, to increase your life force energy. Let that rain fall down. I'm just going to stop speaking for a moment because I want you now to focus on the music and focus on your body and your breathing and really go for it. Allow any of that shadowy stuff that needs to come out and be seen to come out now. Move around your room, move around your space. Be gentle with yourself. Moving in the rain. If any energy starts to shift and emotions come, let it come, let it come. Cry a tear for yourself, cry a tear for another. Cry a tear for something that hasn't happened yet, that has already happened yet. come back now to a more centered position. With one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Go back to the rocking motion. And just notice how your body is feeling after all of that movement. Bring your hands out in front of you and imagine that seed that was originally inside of you. You have 2 seeds now in your hands. Start to imagine that seed growing. So these seeds are electric light growing out of both hands. Take your seeds and place them back into your body to keep this circle of life and creativity circling and spiraling. I'm going to place my hands over my womb because that's where I feel like I need healing energy at the moment. I'm just going to imagine those seeds dripping into my body. Because the words, I bow to you, I think today we should all bow to ourselves. So let's sing this together. And I bow to you. Super simple. Bow to you. And I bow to you. And I bow to you. Find yourself back in a seated position now. And we're just going to bring a bit more voice through now. I think it's important. We've meditated, we've moved now. Let's use one of our other creative capacities, which is our capacity to speak and our capacity to sing. Embraces me. And if you don't know the words, that's fine, just hum along. The lyrics are, I bow to you. And 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 I bow to you. So now the lyrics are Gurudev Namo, which is about bringing the energy back into yourself. So bringing it back into this seed of our human, of our person. Namo Gurudev. chills all the way down my arms. Really feel that energy coming back to you. Fill your body up from the sides. Feel it pouring over you. It's like a bucket of infinite possibility pouring over you. Doesn't it feel good to use our voices? Namu Nama, Namu Nama, Namu Nama, Namu Nama, Namu Nama. Hold your hands out again and fill them up with more source energy, more energy from the group, more energy from life. Nama, Namu Nama, Namu Nama, Namu Nama. Notice where it's landing now in your body. Is there any last little movements or areas you want to touch and bless and give thanks to, bowing to you? To you, I bow to you, and 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 I bow to you. Find yourself back in a comfortable seated or laying down position. I'm going to draw around each and every one of your aura with my selenite wand. You may feel a cleansing, clearing happening as I go around. It's leaving a thread of diamond white light. It's connecting us all together, but also keeping our personal power intact, enhancing our sovereignty. And as this thread of diamond white light weaves its way between all of our souls, I'd like you to cast your mind back to the beginning of this workshop and think of one thing that you would like to take from Neo's teachings and bring into your life, bring into your reality. And I invite you to remember your seed self, your soul seed, and what it was that you wanted to create. Can you make a commitment to yourself today to bring some of that soul seed into your reality? Allow whatever moments of stillness and integration before we come back up. I'm sending a blessing of sacred smudge to you now. Start to lengthen your breath. Now take 3 really deep breaths in and out. And with each breath in, start to come a little bit more back to life. So bring perhaps some movement into your fingers. Next inhale, roll your shoulders. And on your third inhale and an exhale, big stretch. Come round and come up in your own time. If you just want to keep your video off, then that's totally cool. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking part, and thank you for showing up for yourself and really, really going for it. I saw some beautiful heart-centered action going on there, and I'm really excited to hear how the experience was for you. So I'll stick around now for a little bit to take any questions or any sharings.
Thank you so much, Emma. Wow. Bless you, sister. And what a beautiful transition from Neo. What dynamic duo of divinity that was. It just was just perfect, and just a great way to integrate and embed all the information and wisdom and intel from Neo's. Thank you, Emma. Thank you both. I love it about these Zoom things. Like, obviously we can't meet up in person. We're meeting up here, and we're making it not only work, but we're making it transformational and transcendental, in the sense of when you were doing your throwing and making us receive the energy, I was totally feeling it from the group, from you. The selenite wand totally worked. Anybody who wants to know about that, the selenite wand, apparently, what does it do, Emma? It
Clears your aura.
And it works well if you work a lot online on
Zoom.
We're all working on the Zoom to just cleanse before and after sessions, isn't it?
Yeah, so good. I can feel it now. That's amazing. Yeah, it sort of cuts out that digital fuzz that you get.
Yeah, I mean, especially people who are, working as practitioners or healers themselves, it's a really great thing. Now, guys, I'd love it if, I know we're over time, but if you do need to trip off, don't worry. But if you want to ask Emma or Nia any questions, just raise your hand. I'm going to stop the record.